Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to take you through a deep dive into a dramatic and tragic turn in the story of Crimea, a region that has long been at the heart of geopolitical ambition, myth-making, and conflict. The video we're reviewing is titled, Putin's Crimea Dream Ends in Disaster, Millions Panics, Collapse and Water Crisis. Over the next few minutes I'll walk you through what the video claims, the broader context, what the evidence supports, and what lies ahead for the people living through it. Let's begin. From the start, the video paints a dire picture. It describes taps going dry, long queues for water, rationing that spreads from major cities to small towns, and widespread panic among millions of residents. The narrative suggests the Russian state, despite its control over Crimea, is failing at providing one of the most basic needs, water. That opening claim deserves scrutiny, because while it is dramatic, it also taps into a real, worsening crisis: Crimea's dependence on external water sources, damage to infrastructure, drought, and the cascading effects of war. To understand how we got here, we need to go back a little in time. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, it inherited a region that was heavily dependent on mainland Ukraine for its freshwater supply. Crimea, especially its northern and central parts, is relatively arid and lacks substantial indigenous fresh water sources. That dependency was mainly mediated through the North Crimean Canal, which channeled water from the Dnipro River on the Ukrainian mainland into Crimea. After the annexation, Ukraine cut off the canal supply, leaving Crimea struggling. Over the years, Russia attempted various fixes: small-scale pumping, reclaiming local water sources, drilling wells, desalination experiments, and so on. But the scale of supply needed was vast, especially for agriculture, industry, and cities. Then in 2023 came a pivotal moment: the destruction or collapse of the Kakhovka Dam on the Dnipro River. That dam and its accompanying reservoir were integral to sustaining the water supply to the North Crimean Canal. With that barrier destroyed, the water feeding into the canal dropped dramatically. The video argues this event was a turning point, that the dream of Crimea under Russian control cracked open into catastrophe. And that's not just rhetorical. The data and reports backing up the claims are sobering. Problems now multiply. The North Crimean Canal, once supplying up to 85% of Crimea's water, is largely non-functional. The damage to infrastructure, war in Ukraine, and repeated attacks on water-related systems make repairs risky or impossible. Drought and unusually harsh weather add further stress. Institutional neglect, corruption, and mismanagement worsen the crisis, eroding what might be modest local capacity to cope. Let's examine how this crisis plays out on the ground. The video describes scenes of millions panicking. Is that exaggeration? Reports from Ukraine, independent media, and humanitarian monitors suggest the water crisis in Russian-occupied territories is already severe. In places like Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and even in Crimea, people report water flowing only intermittently, days without safe tap water, filthy or foul-smelling water when it does run. Some neighborhoods may only get water one day in 3, and even then for limited hours. Children have posted direct appeals to Putin: "Uncle Putin, help us. Give us water." In Mariupol and Donbass, residents line up with bottles at distribution trucks, or rely on humanitarian deliveries. This isn't just inconvenience, it is a crisis of public health, dignity, and social order. The video also argues collapse, that local economies, agriculture, and food systems are unraveling. Again, this is a logical extension. If the water supply dwindles, then farms suffer, crops die, food prices spike, industries dependent on water underperform, and local social tensions intensify. Multiple observers have warned that food production and export losses will follow. One striking claim in the video is that Crimea, once a centerpiece of Russia's narrative of return and prestige, is now emblematic of failure. That Putin's vision of a modern, integrated Crimean region controlled and benefiting Russia may now fall apart under the weight of basic resource collapse. That symbolism has weight. Crimea was meant to be a showcase, a Black Sea pearl, a military and geopolitical jewel, and a regional hub. But dreams must survive in infrastructure, not just propaganda. Let's pause here for a moment, and examine some counter-arguments, gaps, and where we must be cautious. First, it's unlikely that the entire crisis was inevitable or uncontrollable. Some of it arises from policy choices: whether to invest in infrastructure, whether to prioritize agriculture versus urban water, whether to manage corruption and leaks, whether to maintain redundancy, whether to repair early and often. The video glosses over those choices in favor of a dramatic narrative, but the truth lies in both structural constraints and human agency. Second, attribution is contested. Some narratives push the idea that Ukraine or antagonists caused deliberate water sabotage to punish Crimea. Others assert Russia's own negligence or even deliberate strategy. The video leans toward blaming Putin's miscalculation or hubris. That is defensible. Many experts have noted that the dam's destruction likely was carried out by interior forces inside it, possibly Russian operatives. But interpretations diverge, and strategic fog remains. Third, we should avoid monolithic depictions of millions panicking without nuance. Some areas of Crimea might still manage through wells, rain harvesting, or partial desalination. The crisis is uneven. The video tends to flatten variance for rhetorical effect. Fourth, long-term demographic shifts, migration, or shifts in settlement patterns are uncertain. Will people leave en masse? Or will they adapt and endure, as people often do under hardship? Overall, though, the video frames a compelling and mostly evidence-backed narrative, that Putin's Crimea dream, once built on conquest and myth, is now running into the hard limits of water, climate, war, and infrastructure. Now, toward the end of the video, the narration suggests that the collapse in Crimea presages broader collapse, not just for occupied Ukraine, but for Russia's claims, legitimacy, and control in the region. That maybe this is a turning point. That dreams founded on force cannot outlast nature. That's dramatic, but not far-fetched. What can we infer about what comes next? For Crimea and for people living there, continued scarcity and crisis in water supply, unless a major fix is engineered, which would require massive investment, risk, and grounded engineering. Worsening public health, waterborne diseases, sanitation breakdown, more pressure on hospitals and services. Agricultural contraction, reduced yields, fallow land, food imports with higher costs. Increased internal discontent. While tight control and repression remain, basic unmet needs often provoke protests or quiet resistance. Demographic shifts. Some people may leave, others may migrate internally to better served zones. For the broader conflict and geopolitics, the water crisis could become a new front in the war. Water infrastructure may be militarized, targeted more aggressively, used as leverage. Ukraine and allies may pressure accountability, treat water and ecological sabotage as war crimes. The propaganda war intensifies. Russia will likely try to spin crisis as sabotage, blockade, or unavoidable hardship, while Ukraine and critics will emphasize misrule, neglect, and ecological destruction. Reconstruction after a conflict, if and when it comes, will require enormous investment in water systems, canal repair, dam rebuilding, desalination, modernization. The costs will weigh heavily. Russia's broader ambition in the Black Sea region, in Ukraine's south, may be impaired if the economic and symbolic viability of Crimea erodes. To summarize what I see as the strong core of the video's claim, that the grand vision of a Crimea firmly, sustainably integrated into a Russian state is now under existential stress, not from missiles or sanctions, but from water, the lifeblood of any society. When you can't guarantee water, you can't guarantee legitimacy, stability, or growth. My verdict: the video's framing is bold, it mixes analysis and dramatization, but many of its claims map onto ground truth. The severity of the water crisis, its roots in infrastructure breakdown, war damage, strategic decisions, and climate stress is real. The extent of panic and collapse may be somewhat stylized, but not wildly so given what's already reported in occupied zones. The conclusion, that Putin's dream may unravel, is not certainty, but a plausible trajectory. If I were to tweak the video, I would ask for more on comparisons. How does Crimea's crisis compare to other contested zones? I'd want more interviews with residents, with water engineers, with skeptical voices. I'd like scenario modeling about what recovery would take, costs, timelines, and obstacles. I'd want to hear more about local coping mechanisms and human stories, not just abstract tragedy. If you're planning to make your own version or share or adapt, I would suggest weaving in visuals, maps of canals, before-after dam and reservoir levels, satellite images, interviews with residents queuing for water, graphs of supply drops, and restoration efforts. Also timeline overlays. 2014 annexation, canal cutoff, repair attempts, dam collapse in 2023, drought years, 2024-2025, etc. In closing, this is a cautionary tale. The politics of land conquest may promise power and symbolism, but the politics of survival depend on resources, especially water. Crimea is now not just a battleground of war, but a crucible of resource politics, and its future will tell us much about the limits of force without sustainability. Thanks for watching. If you found this review helpful, hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. I'll see you in the next video.